everybody, it's Brock and we got a brand new episode of All About. We got something unique for you today. It's not a fish, not even a coral. It's actually going to be about brown jelly disease. This is one of the most relentless things that attacks my corals, can attack your corals, and it's one that's hard to treat and it's hard to have your corals recover from it. So let's get into what it is, how did it get on my corals, and how can I treat it and keep it away, and some preventative measures to help do that. So what is brown jelly disease? The disease will attack corals that are going to be stressed or have exposed injuries, causing the polyps and internal tissues to dissolve into a jelly-like brown blob that you're seeing in the video. Very similar to rapid tissue loss. What's so hard about this disease is even scientists are still stumped as to why it occurs on the corals. Even recent studies can only come up with ways to treat it, but very little as to how to prevent it. If you're someone that loves euphyllia corals, this will be something you may run into eventually. Corals like torches, frog spawns, hammer corals are the most common ones that are going to get hit by this disease, but other corals can get it too. The best preventions are to keep up with your water levels, make sure you're not overfeeding, and if a coral is damaged, treat it quick. Hopefully the video gives you a good idea of what to look for, what it looks like. It's just this brown jelly mass that sits on top of the corals. Now, if you do have brown jelly disease on one of your corals, it's time to treat it. First thing you need to do is decide, is it worth saving? This disease is very fast. Sometimes an entire head of coral can be gone overnight. Brown jelly is extremely contagious too on your surrounding corals. So let's use some examples. In the videos, you're going to see brown jelly attacking torch corals, hammers, a frag of something that I don't remember what it was, and my all-time favorite bubble coral. So I'm going to give you my experience with it first. The torch corals, I had 6 healthy heads, or what I thought was healthy, and one morning I woke up and the top 3 heads were already gone, covered in brown jelly. So I first tested my water, the parameters were in check, so that was good. And the next thing was to do some fragging and some dipping. So I had some Coral RX on hand. So I got a bucket, put some water in it, tank water of course, dosed the water with the dip, and then set the torch corals in the bucket. I then got some scissors and fragged the already 3 dead heads off of the torch, let those good heads sit in the dip for 15 minutes, and then placed the 3 good ones back into the tank. The next morning, sadly, those other 3 heads were already covered in jelly like you see in the video, so I immediately took them out and threw them away. And get ready because it smells horrible. Now, this is just a total guess, but the only thing I could conclude from the reason my torches got the brown jelly is because they constantly fought back and forth with some rose bulb anemones and other surrounding corals. So they were constantly fighting and stinging other stuff. They were getting stung by stuff. It's just because you have a really crowded tank at times whenever your corals get this big. So maybe that stress ended up getting the disease started. About a week later, the hammers at the bottom of my tank started getting hit with it hard to the point where there was no use in even trying to save them. I mean, it was covered in the stuff overnight. 75% of the heads were already covered with the jelly. Going back in time, I think I messed up by simply lifting the torches out of the tank instead of siphoning out that jelly, because simply moving a coral with brown jelly on it, you'll notice some of that jelly will fall off, and if you got power heads on or flow in the tank, that stuff's going to fly around, and I'm pretty sure that's why the hammers ended up getting hit with it so soon after the fact of trying to heal my torches. So this time around with the hammers, I siphoned them off completely, got all that jelly off into a bucket to dump before lifting that empty frag out of the tank. After that incident, I hadn't ran into it in years. Then this past year, if you stay up to date on my videos, you'll know I had a heater issue that caused a spike in temperature of my tank that caused tons of stuff to perish. A few days after getting the levels back in check, my bubble coral started getting hit with the brown algae. And if you know me, that's like my all-time favorite coral. I've had it for many, many years. So I had some coral dip from Bright Royal Aquatics on hand. So for 3 days in a row, I went in and dipped it, did the whole thing. You take some water out, put it in a bucket, put the dosing in there, and then let them sit for 15 to 30 minutes, put them back in the tank. And I repeated that for 3 days, but obviously, as you can see from the video, the coral was just too far gone And I ended up having to siphon all that jelly out because he just ended up becoming covered in it by the end of it, and there was nothing left of a bubble coral anymore. So I sucked all that out, had a huge white skeleton that I kept, and I put it on my bookshelf as a little statue over there. But even though I did not have much luck against the disease when I've ran into it, there are some things that others have tried and actually had success with. So one thing, I'd actually had this installed on the tank, but something that really helps is to have a UV on the tank. This just overall helps defeat so many issues and diseases that come in with the tank. So if you have a UV sterilizer on there, that's just a light that's going to be shooting past the water at all times, and it helps overall keep a lot of these headaches in your tank away. Make sure you got plenty of bacteria, probiotics in the tank. That way you have a lot of confidence in a healthy reef. And then also some other chemicals I've seen people use that are really good is a mix of iodine and potassium chloride. You can also do Revive from Two Little Fish, Reef Primer from Polyp Lab, and also a Cipro dip, which is another kind of wild one. I think the full name is ciprofloxacin. It's just another kind of dip you can do for the corals to try to eliminate all of that brown jelly disease off of them. If it's for me, usually just try to go with the chemicals. It's already something that's pre-made. It has good results. I mean, the Coral RX and the coral dip that I've used in the past has done really great for any injuries that my corals get. If they start stinging each other, I'll usually dip them in that. It's worked amazing. Just sometimes this brown jelly disease is just impossible to beat. For these, they typically have the same directions on them. You can check the directions online, check it on the bottle. You usually just have to take some water out into a bucket, mix the solution into that water, and then dip the coral in the water for 15 to 30 minutes, and then put it back into the tank. During this time, try to get off any jelly that you see in place before putting them back into the tank if you're trying to get them to survive. And then usually, for mine, I go 3 days in a row, then give them a couple days of rest, and then we'll start that process again until they're completely healed. And also a side note, wear gloves when you deal with this stuff. I mean, you're literally dealing with an underwater disease. Also, wash your hands thoroughly before and after, please. So let's talk about prevention one more time before we go. So tank maintenance is always a huge one. Keep up with those water changes. Watch your levels. High phosphates and nitrates can give corals an easy chance for infection, causing stress on them. You don't want that to happen, so keep up with your water levels. Make sure your temperature's in check. As you can see, I ran into an issue with that. Too high can cause a lot of stress on your corals. Even overcrowding can be an issue. Make sure your corals aren't constantly fighting with other surrounding corals like mine were, because that just ends up with injuries and ends up with problems with corals that could lead to brown jelly disease. Just overall, making sure your corals are healthy. Feed them, study them. You're doing everything perfect, but you still run into that brown jelly. Treat it quick with what you've learned in the video and also additional research that you can find online. Just one of them things that does not have a ton of facts and a ton of solutions yet, but we're still studying it each and every day to try to find out more about it. And after that, that's really going to conclude my experience and my recommendations and my research on the brown jelly disease. If you have any experience dealing with this, please leave it down in the comments for future hobbyists to see. With the little scientific facts to go off of, our experiences with it are really what's going to help each other deal with it when it does hit our tanks. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell your friends and family about us. It's going to be a great year of all about videos, and I'm so excited to have y'all here for the ride. Make sure to stay safe, be kind, and I'll see y'all later.